When I first walked into the waiting room for that job interview, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It was one of those sleek, modern offices where everything felt just a little too clean, too perfect. There were about 6 of us there, men in suits, each looking just as nervous as the next. I remember trying to stay calm, focusing on my breathing, while secretly wondering if any of us had a chance of landing the job. Jennifer Richards, the CEO, was legendary. I had read about her. Tough, powerful, a woman who built her empire from the ground up. People admired her, feared her even, and now here I was, sitting just a few rooms away from her. But no amount of preparation could have prepared me for what came next. When the door opened, Jennifer stepped out herself. I was surprised. CEOs don't usually come out to personally call in candidates. She had this aura, like she knew she was in charge the second she stepped into a room. All eyes were on her. She was breathtaking in an almost terrifying way. Her beauty was undeniable, and it wasn't just physical. She had this effortless elegance that made her seem untouchable, like she existed on a different plane from the rest of us. Her hair was perfectly styled, cascading in loose waves over her shoulders. And her outfit, a fitted black dress, hugged her curves in a way that was both professional and seductive. Her skin seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights, and her sharp, piercing eyes scanned the room like she was evaluating each one of us before we even spoke a word.
Gentlemen,
She said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes.
I appreciate you all being here. Follow me.
We exchanged glances, but did as we were told. She led us into this big conference room, and for a moment, I thought this was going to be just like any other interview. But I was wrong. So damn wrong.
She turned to face us, her expression turning cold.
Before we begin, I want to make something clear.
She said, pacing slowly in front of us.
I don't just hire based on resumes and experience. I hire based on loyalty. And I need to know that whoever I bring into this company will follow my orders, without question.
Her words hung in the air like a loaded gun. We stood there, shifting uncomfortably, unsure of what she meant. Then, without warning, she stopped in front of us and said,
Take off your pants.
My heart stopped. I thought I had misheard her, but the look in her eyes said otherwise. We all just stood there, frozen, trying to process what she just said. The tension in the room soared.
I won't ask again.
She said, her voice icy.
If you want this job, do it. Now.
Some of the guys hesitated, their faces filled with disbelief. One of them even muttered,
Is she serious?
but she just stood there waiting. And when no one moved, she made it clear she wasn't bluffing.
The door is right there if you can't handle following simple instructions.
She said, pointing to the exit.
But if you leave now, you'll never work in this industry again. I'll make sure of it.
Everyone took off their pants except me. She stood up and went to each of them, inspecting them closely. Then she came to me. I had challenged her for the very first time. She smiled and then said,
You think you are different from them? Take off your pants or leave the room.
I could not afford to lose the job. I could see anger in her eyes. She had the power to ruin our careers before they even began. And as much as I wanted to walk out, I couldn't. I needed this job. I had bills to pay and a pregnant wife at home. This was my shot. So despite every instinct screaming at me to leave, I unbuttoned my pants. I was seeing how she would respond. Surprisingly, her anger vanished, and her facial expressions changed. She was surprised, and I could see the twisted smile on her face. The smile I had only seen in women who wanted something I did not want to give.
You really are different,
She said.
I now know why you were hesitant in showing me that. Oh boy, I can't take my eyes off of it.
Then she looked at me with a smile and said,
You are hired.
I didn't know what to feel. relief, shame, anger. They all mixed together in my mind as I quickly pulled my pants back on, my hands shaking. She dismissed the others without so much as a second glance. They left, some looking pissed off, others just grateful to get out of there. As soon as the room emptied, she turned her attention back to me.
You've made the right decision.
She said, walking towards me, her smile returning. Up close, she was even more stunning. Her perfume a subtle mix of jasmine and something musky. Her presence overwhelming.
I'm going to make sure you're well taken care of here. But remember, loyalty is everything. I'll be in touch.
And with that, she left the room, leaving me standing there alone, my heart still racing. That was just the beginning. I thought maybe, just maybe, that was the worst of it, that she had tested me. And now, we could move on to the actual work. But that's not how things went. Not with Jennifer Richards. The next encounter came a week later. I was working late, trying to prove myself when I got an unexpected call from her office. Her assistant told me she wanted to see me. I remember thinking, already? I had barely gotten started at the company, but I didn't question it. I went to her office. When I walked in, she was sitting behind her desk, dressed impeccably as always, but there was something in her eyes that put me on edge. The door closed behind me, and she looked up with that same predatory smile I had seen before.
Take a seat.
She said, her voice smooth. I sat, trying to keep my nerves in check, but I could feel the tension building. She didn't waste any time. She leaned forward, her eyes locked onto mine.
I've been thinking about our last meeting.
She said, her voice low, almost seductive.
I think you have potential, Mike. But I need to know how far that potential goes.
I didn't say anything. My mouth had gone dry. She stood up, walking slowly around her desk, her heels clicking softly against the floor. When she reached me, she stopped and leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear.
Take off your pants.
She whispered, the words sending a shiver down my spine. I felt that same sickening pit in my stomach that I had felt during the interview. I knew what was coming, and I knew that walking away wasn't an option. Not anymore. Not if I wanted to keep my job. So I did it. I took off my pants, just like she asked. But this time, it wasn't just about humiliation. This time she wanted more. And she made it clear that if I didn't give her exactly what she wanted, I would be out on the street. She took her time, savoring the moment, enjoying her power over me. She intentionally started walking in a seductive style, seeing what would happen. I was embarrassed, but she was enjoying. Then, seeing the target, she smiled as her moves had worked. She just wanted to see whether the things she had chosen me for worked or not. Now she knew she could expect more. When her observation was over, she patted my cheek, just like before, and sent me on my way. This went on for weeks. Every time I thought I might have a chance to distance myself from her, she would call me into her office, or send me a message late at night. I was trapped in her web, and no matter how hard I tried to find a way out, she always pulled me back in. Then one night, it escalated even further. She had called me to her penthouse suite this time. I knew what was coming, but I still showed up, just like she knew I would. When I got there, she was lounging on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand, wearing nothing but a silk robe. The way the silk clung to her body was impossible to ignore, her curves accentuated with every movement, her skin glowing in the soft light of the room. She looked like something out of a dream, beautiful and feminine in a way that made my heart race, yet dangerous enough to remind me of the power she held over me.
Mike,
She said, motioning for me to sit beside her.
you've done well so far, but tonight I want to see something different. I want you to make me feel something I've never felt before.
I hesitated, but she didn't give me a choice. She wanted to see how far I would go, how much I was willing to give up for this job, for my career. And in that moment, I realized just how deeply I had fallen into her control. There was no escaping this. She pushed me to the edge that night, guiding my every move, her hands directing me, her body responding to everything I did. It was like she was in total control, but at the same time, she seemed to be losing herself in the moment, her face flushed, her breath quickening. She was powerful, beautiful, and terrifying all at once, and I knew that I was completely at her mercy. The room was quiet, dimly lit, and the air felt heavy with tension. The lady boss suddenly shed an aura of authority, revealing a different side of herself, one brimming with desire and intent. She slowly guided me towards the bed, her touch delicate but insistent. I hesitated, nerves colliding with curiosity, but allowed myself to be led. She laid me down gently, her eyes never leaving mine. Then, in a move that caught me off guard, she got on her knees beside the bed, her gaze now filled with a sense of determination. What followed was an act forbidden by the invisible lines. Society draws, but often leaves blurred in moments of intense connection. Her hands, steady and skillful, explored with an unspoken understanding, and as she did the forbidden, she claimed that moment as her own. She was looking at me, opening her mouth and showing me her tongue. I was enjoying myself like never before. She knew what to do. Afterward, she rose quietly and lay beside me, her breath still heavy from the encounter. She turned her body towards mine, trying to close the space between us. Her lips hovered close to mine, kissing me intensely. She knew exactly what she wanted next, and her proximity made it clear that she wouldn't leave this encounter without fulfilling her desires completely. As her lips brushed against mine, she silently urged me to surrender, letting me know that there was no turning back from the path we had started down. Her hands roamed once more, guiding me deeper into the moment, ensuring that everything unfolded just the way she wanted it to. An encounter that was both forbidden and entirely within her control. When it was over, she smiled, satisfied in a way I hadn't seen before. She was sweating and panting, and I could feel her heartbeat even from a distance.
You've earned your place here, Mike.
She said, her voice soft and almost tender.
You've pleased me more than anyone ever has. Keep this up and you'll go far. Maybe even as CEO one day.
I left that night, knowing I had crossed a line that I could never come back from. My life wasn't my own anymore. It belonged to her. After this encounter, she gave me the corner office. It wasn't just any office. It was a sprawling space, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the kind of place that screamed power and success. I had only been with the company for a few months, and yet here I was, sitting in a position most men would kill for. But the reality was far darker than anyone could imagine. Jennifer wasn't just grooming me for success. She was molding me into something else entirely. The big office was just the start. Within months, she made me CEO, handing me a position that should have taken years to achieve. She smiled when she did it, that same predatory smile I'd come to know too well. She told me it was because of my talent, but we both knew the truth, and what my talent was. This wasn't about merit. It was about control. That's when she started playing in the office. She would come into my office whenever she pleased. I'd be sitting behind my desk trying to focus on the work that came with being a CEO, but every time I heard the door click shut, my stomach would twist into knots. She never knocked, never asked if I was available. She simply walked in, locking the door behind her. Her presence was suffocating, and I always knew what was coming next.
Mike, I think it's time for a break.
She would whisper in that low, seductive voice that sent chills down my spine.
She'd circle my desk, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor, her eyes gleaming with that same dangerous hunger. And then, without another word, she'd kneel under my desk, her hands already working to unbuckle my belt. I would try to continue working, pretending like nothing was happening, but it was impossible. Every time she would take her time, drawing it out until I was left breathless and shaken, knowing that I had no choice but to comply. And she left no marks.
If you want to keep that office,
She would say afterward, her lips brushing against my ear.
you'll make sure to keep me satisfied.
This wasn't an isolated incident. It became routine. At any given moment, Jennifer would come in, lock the door, and make me submit to her desires. Sometimes she would sit on my chair, making me go down on her, holding my head and gasping with pleasure. But it didn't end in the office. Soon, she began calling me late at night, more often than before.
I'm lonely.
She'd say over the phone, her voice dripping with need.
Come over. I need you, Mike.
At first, I tried to resist, telling her I had work or that I couldn't leave my wife, but she was relentless.
You wouldn't leave me alone, would you?
She'd whisper.
I don't have anyone else, Mike. Just you. My husband is long gone and I need someone.
I would drive to her penthouse in the dead of night, dreading every mile but knowing I had no choice. She would always greet me the same way, with a glass of wine in hand and wearing something lacy and revealing. Her eyes would light up when she saw me, and she'd pull me inside with a soft laugh, guiding me toward her bedroom without saying a word. Those nights were long and exhausting, and not just physically. They took a toll on my mind, chipping away at whatever remained of my dignity. She didn't have a husband anymore. She made that abundantly clear. And because of that, I was expected to fill that void. I was there to please her, to give her what she wanted, whenever she wanted it. And every time I thought I might break away, she'd remind me of everything I stood to lose.
I made you CEO,
She would say after another long night spent in her bed.
but I can just as easily take it all away.
And so, I stayed trapped in her web. I would arrive at the office each morning, trying to play the part of the successful executive, but deep down, I knew the truth. My success wasn't my own. It belonged to her. Every meeting, every decision I made was haunted by the knowledge that at any moment, Jennifer could walk in, lock the door, and remind me of exactly why I was there. The encounters became more frequent. She started calling me over to her penthouse multiple times a week, always with the same lonely plea.
Come over, Mike. I need you tonight.
And I'd go, knowing that my future depended on keeping her happy. She didn't care about boundaries, didn't care about my marriage, or the toll it was taking on me. All that mattered was that I kept fulfilling her desires. Eventually, the lines blurred completely. I became hers, in every sense of the word. The office, the title, the money, it was all just a facade. Behind closed doors, I was nothing more than her toy, her plaything to use as she pleased, and with every encounter, I lost a little more of myself. Jennifer had made me, but she had also destroyed me. I was CEO, yes, but I was also her prisoner, bound to her every whim. And no matter how much I tried to convince myself that I was still in control, I knew deep down that I had already lost. And the worst part? There was no going back. I'm not proud of what I did. Looking back now, it's clear that I traded my dignity for success, and the price was far greater than I could have imagined. It's easy to think that power and status can make up for the things you lose along the way, but the truth is, nothing can replace your integrity. I thought I had no choice, that I was trapped in her world, bound by her control. But the truth is, I did have a choice. I could have walked away, even when it felt impossible. I could have valued myself enough to say no, to take back the power I thought I'd lost. Now I know that no job, no amount of money or status is worth sacrificing your soul. I wish I had realized that sooner. Because the moment you give up control over your own life, it doesn't matter how high you climb. You'll always be living in someone else's shadow, dancing to their tune. If I was given the choice, I would walk away when my lady boss asked me to take off my pants.